The moment her best friend said his name, I felt the floor drop out from under me. We were standing in a coffee shop in the middle of a completely ordinary afternoon, talking about nothing important, and then she looked at me and said she hoped things settled down soon with everything going on with Sara and Jake. I didn't know anyone named Jake, and when I looked at her face, I realized she had just told me something my girlfriend never meant for me to hear. My name is Ryan and my girlfriend's name is Sara. We had been together for almost 3 years. We met through mutual friends, moved in together last year, and until 4 weeks ago I thought we were in a pretty solid place. Not perfect, just normal. We had routines, we had inside jokes, we had plans. We talked about the future in that quiet, casual way people do when they assume there will be one. And that assumption is what makes this kind of thing so hard, because when a relationship is already cracking, when you've been fighting constantly or barely speaking, betrayal still hurts, but it arrives inside a story that already felt unstable. Mine didn't feel like that. At least not to me. Sara had a best friend, Claudia, and I had always gotten along with her fine. We were never close, but we were comfortable enough around each other that normal conversation was easy. She had known Sara since college, so I always made an effort. I thought she was just part of the background of our life together. I had no idea she would become the person who accidentally exposed everything. If I look back now, I can find things that seemed a little off. That is the part that makes you angry later. Not because the signs were dramatic, they weren't. That is the problem, it was small stuff. Sara being more distracted than usual, her phone face down more often, a little more distance at night, but not enough to start a fight over. Sometimes she would answer me like she was only half in the room, and I let it go. Because when you've been with someone for years, you don't treat every strange mood like a warning. People get tired, people get stressed. People bring work home in their heads. What was I supposed to do? Interrogate her every time she seemed distracted? We were living together by then, and living together can make small changes harder to see clearly. Once you share a home, everything starts to blur into routine. Laundry, groceries, bills, dinner, screens, sleep. A relationship can look stable from the outside just because it is organized. I want you to remember this moment. A lot of betrayal stories do not begin with obvious lies. They begin with ordinary life doing a very good impression of safety. You think calm means honesty. You think routine means loyalty. You think being included in someone's daily life means you know what is happening inside it. And I believed that. Sara and I were not having major fights. There was no big cold war in the apartment. No one sleeping on the couch. No long speeches about unhappiness. If anything, that is what still gets me. There was no official collapse. She was still saying normal things, still making plans, still acting like we were moving forward. Meanwhile, apparently, she had been seeing someone from work for 4 months. 4 months. That number matters because it tells you this was not one bad night, not one stupid impulse, not one moment of weakness that got out of hand. 4 months is a second life. 4 months is scheduling, hiding, adjusting your tone, deleting evidence, managing two realities at once. And all that time I was still inside the first reality, thinking it was the only one. At the time, I had no idea what this meant. If you had asked me then how we were doing, I probably would have said something boring and normal. Good, busy, fine. Same as always. That's how little I knew. Even with Claudia, there had never been any sign. She never acted strange around me, never hinted at anything, never treated me like some guy being lied to in public. And I guess that's because she genuinely thought I already knew. That part matters too, because it means Sara had built this whole false picture, not just for me, but for other people too. Apparently she had been telling Claudia she was going to tell me, which sounds almost funny until you sit with it for a second. Going to tell me when? After 5 months? 6? After she decided which man she wanted? After I accidentally found out anyway? What does "I'm gonna tell him" even mean when you keep waking up every morning and choosing not to? 4 weeks ago, I ran into Claudia at a coffee shop. Just the two of us. Sara wasn't there. It was random, one of those harmless little encounters that would never matter in a normal life. We talked for maybe 10 minutes about nothing important. Work, mutual friends, surface level things. Then, right as she was getting ready to leave, she said she really hoped things settled down for us soon. She said Sara had told her we'd been having a rough patch. That confused me immediately because as far as I knew, we hadn't been having a rough patch. Not in any serious sense. I remember giving this vague answer because I still thought maybe there had been some misunderstanding. Then Claudia looked at me a little strangely and said, "You know, with everything going on with her and Jake, and what I found next changed everything. Not in the sense that I went searching through a phone at that exact second. What changed everything was that one instant of pure confusion, the second where your brain stops and tries to sort reality into two piles, what you thought you knew and what is now impossible to ignore." I said I didn't know anyone named Jake. That's all I said. And I will never forget Claudia's face after that. It changed immediately. Not slowly. Immediately. The second she realized I had no idea, all the color dropped out of the conversation. She went quiet. She said, "Oh," in this very small voice, like the word had slipped out before she could stop it. Then she said she had to go. And she left. I stood there staring at my coffee for what felt like forever. I wasn't even fully angry yet. That came later. First there was disbelief, that strange numbness where your mind keeps trying to invent a better explanation, because the obvious one is too ugly to accept all at once. Maybe Jake was just a work friend. Maybe there was some rumor. Maybe Claudia misunderstood something. Maybe Sara had told people some story that was false for some reason I couldn't yet see. But if that were true, why had Claudia looked like that? Why did her face say in 1 second that she had made a mistake and that the mistake was enormous? I want you to remember this moment. Sometimes the worst part is not the evidence itself. It is the expression on another person's face when they realize you are the last one to know. That look is brutal because it tells you two things at once. First, the truth is real. Second, other people have been standing closer to it than you have. And that can make you feel humiliated in a way that is hard to explain. I drove home in a haze. The whole way back, I kept replaying that sentence. With everything going on with her and Jake, not a rumor, not something weird, not some guy from work who has been bothering her. No, everything going on. That is relationship language. That is not how people talk about nothing. By the time I got home, I already knew that whatever answer I was about to get, my life was divided into a before and an after. I could feel it. The room looked the same, my apartment looked the same, Sarah's things were still there. But mentally, something had already started breaking, and I hadn't even asked the question yet. I went straight to Sarah, no warm-up, no circling, no pretending I had not just learned something that could tear the whole thing apart. I asked, "Who is Jake?" She went pale. That was my answer before she even spoke. For a second, she just stared at me. Then came the silence people use when they are trying to calculate how much has already been revealed. I could see her thinking. Not feeling. Thinking. I said it again. "Who is Jake?" She asked where I had heard the name. That was the second answer. Because innocent people do not usually begin there. I told her Claudia mentioned him. And after that, the whole thing started falling apart fast. She admitted Jake was someone she worked with. Then, piece by piece, the rest came out. They had been seeing each other for about 4 months. 4 months. Do you know how sickening it is to hear a number like that from the person standing in your kitchen? The person you live with, the person you have been building a life around. Not 4 days, not one stupid mistake, 4 months of choices. I said, "So while we were living together, while we were talking about our future, you were with someone else?" She started crying. I wish I could say that moved me. It didn't. Because once you realize someone has been lying calmly for that long, tears stop feeling like truth. They start feeling like the next stage of damage control. She told me she had been meaning to tell me. That line almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so insulting. She had been meaning to tell me. Apparently for 4 months she had been meaning to tell me. Every day she woke up beside me and did not tell me. Every dinner, every plan, every normal conversation, she was going to tell me. When? After she was done deciding whether to keep me. After Claudia didn't accidentally say his name. At the time I had no idea what this meant. But standing there, I started to understand one thing very clearly. She had not been struggling to tell me. She had been succeeding in not telling me. There is a difference. I asked if she loved him. She said she didn't know. I asked if she was planning to leave. She said she didn't know. I asked what exactly she thought I was supposed to do with that. No answer. Short sentences. Long silences. Crying. Repeating that she never wanted it to happen like this. But this is how these things always happen when the liar loses control of the timing. The betrayal is one part. The exposure is another. And when exposure comes before confession, you get the raw version of the truth, incomplete, ugly, defensive, and late. That was the last real conversation we had as a couple. We were done. We are not together anymore. That is the cleanest sentence in this whole story, even if the experience itself was anything but clean. Ending it was obvious. Living through the ending was not. I am still processing it. The cheating hurts, obviously. But the part that keeps replaying in my head is not even Sara crying in our apartment. It is Claudia's face in the coffee shop. That exact second when she realized I knew nothing. That split second where her expression changed and my entire understanding of my own relationship changed with it. That is the part that stays with me, because there is something deeply unsettling about finding out the truth by accident through another person's mistake. It makes the whole relationship feel unstable in retrospect. You start going back through everything. Conversations, weekends, late nights, small moments that meant nothing at the time and now look different. Was she texting him while sitting next to me on the couch? Was she thinking about leaving and just waiting for the right moment? How many people knew enough to suspect something while I kept walking around like my life made sense? I want you to remember this moment. The aftershock of betrayal is not just sadness, it is revision. Your mind starts rewriting the past whether you want it to or not. Suddenly, memory becomes an argument between what you felt then and what you know now. And that is exhausting. What I keep coming back to is this: I was not crazy. I was not inattentive in some ridiculous way. I was trusting someone who was lying to me while continuing to act like a partner. That is not naivety. That is what betrayal is. It depends on one person behaving as if the relationship still deserves the shape of honesty, while hollowing it out from the inside. I do not know what Claudia and Sara have said to each other since then. I do not care much. I do not blame Claudia for what happened. If anything, I think she was put in an impossible position by someone who had clearly been feeding her a false story too. But I do think about how close Sara came to controlling the whole narrative. If I had not run into Claudia that day, how much longer would it have gone on? Another month? 2? Longer? Would she ever have told me on her own? Or would I have just kept living beside someone who had already stepped out of the relationship and left me to discover it whenever chance decided I deserved to know? That is the question that still gets under my skin, because cheating is betrayal. But letting someone live inside a lie while you act normal is its own kind of cruelty. Sometimes the worst betrayal is not the affair itself, but the quiet way someone lets you keep believing in a life they already walked away from. Let me know in the comments, did they deserve it, or did this go too far? And if you've been through something similar, share your story below.